mattered for Africa that you lived. As this debate has been going on, Mr. Speaker, I've wanted to look at the eyes of all the senators of this House, Mr. Speaker, and reflect with that statement that to you, Mr. Speaker, today, to my brothers and sisters who are senators of this House, would it have mattered for Kenya that you lived? And I want to extend that same framing to the President and the Deputy President of this country and ask, would it have mattered that they lived? Because when this particular conflict started, Mr. Speaker, there are people who have taken personal stance. And indeed, these issues are personal. They are personal because when young people talk about going without food, it is personal. They are personal because when women in this country go without medicine in hospitals in the country, they are personal. Mr. Speaker, last week when we were reflecting here, and the Senator of Nairobi, Senator Sifuna, came and talked about the possibility of him having a card for expressway that has 377,000. I imagined what happens to villages that people like Senator Meth or Senator Murango comes from, where we have got dispensaries and hospitals, that you will find that they have got ambulances that don't have fuel in those ambulances. And people in this country, Mr. Speaker, are losing lives for a simple reason. They could not be able to get a fueled ambulance. Mr. Speaker, what is happening to my country today is so sad that it made me reflect in my personal life and my personal journey here. And I wanted, Mr. President, us as members of Parliament, to also reflect on our journey personally to where we are today, because sometimes it's easy to forget that, and then we might end up seeing this notion called Gen Zs as just some young people who are protesting in the streets without having homes where they come from. And within those homes, they have got burdens that they're experiencing, that they're facing, that we might be far removed from. So that even when people are talking about dialogue, we might not be dialoguing about the real issues. Mr. Speaker, in 2003, February the 3rd, my mother got sick in the village. Now, in the village where I come from, Mr. Speaker, we used to be tobacco farmers. And as tobacco farmers, Mr. Speaker, when you don't have the capacity to be able to grow tobacco in your own way and be able to have a number from a company that is called BAT at that time, then you end up depending on somebody else who has got more capacity than you. Now, it happened that my family did not have the capacity to be able to grow our own tobacco, Mr. Speaker. So that we were working in what was called then a gok to one gentleman that I still owe a lot of respect to, called Joshua Otieno. He was seen as the most successful farmer in our village, Mr. Speaker, because one of the biggest assets that he owned was a bicycle, Mr. Speaker. At that time, my brothers, when we talk about the issue of education, my brothers and sisters in the village at that time were suffering outside our village to be able to get an education. So I found myself as the oldest son and with my sisters, the daughters of my mother, in the village at that time. My mother got sick, and my dad was not in the village as well. He had gone to also seek for a way of supporting the family, Mr. Speaker. When my mother got sick, Mr. Speaker, as young as I was, I did not know how to even ride a bicycle. So I went to Joshua Otieno, who used to be the person who could help us with his bicycle, and told him, help me with your bicycle, I try and get my mother to the hospital. Of course, I could not be able to ride that bicycle, but I carried my mother to the hospital, and between the 3rd and the 12th of that month, Mr. Speaker, I depended on Joshua's bicycle to take my mother to the hospital. She was there to be diagnosed with what they called chronic malaria. And on 12th in the morning, when we went to the hospital, the doctor told me that your mother cannot be treated here because this chronic malaria can only be treated in referral hospital in Migori town. We have the ambulance, but we don't have fuel. can you be able to go and look for 2,000 shillings so you can take your mother to Migori District Hospital? Of course, I went home. I found my father. When he got home, we didn't have the 2,000 shillings, Mr. Speaker. I will never forget that image that at 11:48 p.m., I lost my mother. I lost my mother to a simple disease called chronic malaria, and I lost my mother because